5th of September, 2025, and coming to you live from northern Israel, talking about Bitcoin. And yeah, Bitcoin is Kwijibo. For those of you who are not familiar with the term, Kwijibo is a made-up word, uh, random assortment of letters assembled by Maggie Simpson, the baby, uh, during one of the earliest episodes, I think maybe the first episode of The Simpsons, or the first primetime episode, whatever it was. I remember seeing it way back in the day when The Simpsons just started. Kwijibo, that Maggie, the baby, had assembled the letters, or written the letters Kwijibo somehow. And basically a nonsense word. Um, and what I mean by it is Bitcoin. And the funny thing is, of course, it's a word that when adults first saw it on The Simpsons, they're like, what is that? And it's obviously a funny typo, but it doesn't make sense, right? To all the, even to the adults watching it in the room. Back when people would gather around the TV and watch a show, that was a thing, boys and girls, young ladies and gentlemen. Um, and that's very much what Bitcoin is in a layperson's sense. It's a thing that seems like nonsense to even adults who aren't familiar with actually what it means. Right? But Bitcoin actually, if you learn about it, is the farthest thing from Kwijibo. It actually makes perfect sense, right? Mathematically, it's just a protocol, right? Which means it operates based on math. That's what it's driven by. Operates on math to determine the number of blocks, to determine the number of Bitcoins that are granted as a reward when a block is solved, right? Or mined. It determines the difficulty of the challenge to discover the next block according to math, calculating things like how much hash power is there currently mining. So it continuously changes the difficulty levels, right? So that the mathematics of mining keep the mining rate fairly stable. Because if you had suddenly a massive miner that could suddenly solve a million blocks at once, then there'd be like no Bitcoin left to mine very, very quickly. And the whole idea of Bitcoin is that the amount that is mined fairly consistently over the course of different periods of time. And as we're now in the point of time where there's only about 1.5 million Bitcoins left to be mined, not even, it makes it even more important for that math to be solid, so that you don't just have, like I said, massive processors extracting the last remaining Bitcoins all to one person or miner. But that said, right, because it's based entirely on math, people who aren't necessarily good at math and who can't or have a hard time comprehending this will even have a hard time reading and comprehending the white paper, which is kind of surprising considering it's written in pretty plain English. Yes, there's some mathematical stuff in there, but it's not really complicated, and you don't actually have to know everything about the formulas you see, or even the schematics, frankly, although they help if you really want to learn how it works. right? But the white paper is really just an overview of what Bitcoin is, or was at its inception. It's a very high level, frankly, easy to read, easy to digest white paper, executive summary, if you want to call it that, right? I mean, it's almost a one pager. It's literally 7 pages or something like that, 9 pages. It's a very, very short document, and that's as it's supposed to be. It's as it was intended, because it was intended to be easy enough to comprehend so that anybody could look at it and say, "Oh, that's interesting," and then decide for themselves whether or not they want to participate in the experiment. And what was the experiment? The experiment was mining Bitcoin and running Bitcoin nodes to secure the network, and then conducting Bitcoin transactions. The experiment was also to see whether or not, by creating a globally scalable cryptocurrency, Bitcoin could actually provide a valid, useful electronic peer-to-peer cash network that secures itself, right, tracks its own transactions, prevents double spending, right, has all the qualities necessary, it's uncensorable, it's divisible, it's mobile, or portable, whatever you want to call it, it's secure. So the experiment was to see whether or not it really could be a way to break free from the traditional financial system. And in many ways, it has proven that it can. Now, you can easily say, well, but Bitcoin isn't actually accepted everywhere yet. That's true. Bitcoin is not yet accepted everywhere. And Bitcoin is not accepted for all transactions yet. But notice there are an increasing amount of places where it is accepted. And notice that already for many years, you could already buy high-ticket items like homes, yachts, speedboats, cars, luxury cars, whatever you want, expensive watches from many different retailers. You could pay for them in Bitcoin. Why is this interesting? Well, it's interesting because it demonstrates that there already is a distribution among the wealthy, right? Either those who acquired their wealth previously or in other ways separate from Bitcoin and then bought a bunch of Bitcoin, or those who got into Bitcoin early, or early enough, or did well enough with the Bitcoin that they got into that they've become wealthy. And they have enough Bitcoin to buy whatever they want using Bitcoin, which makes the transaction in many ways much simpler and much faster than paying a merchant through a middleman like a bank or a credit card or anything, which have multiple layers of middlemen, multiple layers of fees and hidden fees, all that kind of thing. Whereas with Bitcoin, it's just direct peer-to-peer. There is no middleman, unless you're purposefully holding your Bitcoin on someone else's custodial services, like an exchange or private custody services or whatever it might be. And so if you hold the Bitcoin in your wallet, literally nothing stops you from sending your Bitcoin to anyone else with a Bitcoin wallet. And vice versa, nothing stops anyone from sending you Bitcoin to your Bitcoin wallet. So that's why it has demonstrated that it is, in fact, a way to break free from the existing financial system. It isn't yet fully developed to the point where the entire financial system is, in fact, replaceable or replaced by Bitcoin. But it's very easy to argue that probably will be achieved someday, and maybe even in the not so distant future. So that's what I got to say for now. wish you guys well. Happy Bitcoining. See you after you like and subscribe and share this video in the next one. Peace.